Can we come back? Okay. So, just a reminder that we want to recognize that we're on occupied land. This is Haudenosaunee land. And today, if you don't know, Béalleka will be giving a talk at 4:30 here in the same space. We're not moving the chairs because we're going to come back and sit in these same chairs and have today for the noon hour is more of the journey, and then this afternoon is more of a practice. Yeah, exactly. So, and then tomorrow at our usual time, we have Fat Femme Yogi and activist Jessamine Stanley, hosted by Black Student Union. Yes. So if you need to leave during the presentation, do so quietly. You all know that. Clean up around you. You know there's a compost bin in the back, and I think we can move to the real introduction. And so today we have, some people say, have called her a master storyteller. Some have called her a community builder, an artist, a consultant. She does many things that you will learn about in practice. She's also identifying herself as a recovering academic. She's coming to us from Portland, Oregon. And many of the people who come into this space from Portland or from afar usually don't know anything about what we do here in Women's Studies, but Béalleka knows what we do here in Women's Studies, because Béalleka has been part of building this space and building this community. And I arrived in 2002, Béalleka arrived in 2004. We came to Brown Bags together. We became fast friends once we realized that we were Virgos. We were doing work on intimacy in various ways, peculiar intimacies, as one of her talks was titled, that we were queer identified in a space that wasn't, that we were studying white supremacy, we were living in and learning about white supremacy in this particular institution. So we had many amazing conversations and have been part of this space for a long time. And so Béalleka knows just what we do here in Women's Studies, and it's amazing to welcome her back. I think it's been 7 years since Béalleka has been here. She came once before to give a talk. So yeah, we're fortunate to have her back in this space. We will say more about her bio tonight, but for now I think she's going to fill in the gaps as far as the journey. So welcome back. So glad to have you. Woo.
Hello, everyone. Hi. I think because it's the recovering academic talk, I should say, hi, everyone. My name is Béalleka, and I'm a recovering academic. I will say hello. The title of this talk, also Confessions of a Recovering Academic, sounds sort of salacious, like I'm going to be telling a romance novel story. And it's not, but it would be kind of cool if I could throw in some of the romance. So I'll try to do that. I'm going to start instead. Well, first I want to say thank you. Thank you so much to Vika and to the Women's Studies Program Center, all of you for being here and welcoming me back on this campus. It's really lovely to be here. So I may be a recovering academic, but I still appreciate my time on the academic campuses where I have worked and lived. I'm going to start with a story, but not a romance novel story, but a children's story, very short. There once was a little girl who had a little curl right in the center of her forehead. And when she was good, she was very good. And when she was bad, she was horrid. That's a nursery rhyme that was given to me, branded to me basically, at age 1 when my mother threw a Mother's theme party for my sister's 4th birthday. And all the kids in our neighborhood received an invitation with a customized nursery rhyme and costume that they were supposed to come in for the party. Jack and Jill, Little Miss Muffet, Humpty Dumpty. My mother was Mother Goose, my sister was the little goose girl, and I was the little girl with the curl, either very good or horrid. So that dichotomy of beliefs, I could either be one or the other, but not both, stayed with me for the next 4 years. And I'm still working through it because it's a very hard belief system to break out of, this kind of idea that you can do one thing and be good, play by the rules, look appropriate, behave like your peers, your colleagues, or do anything different from that, which is the horror end of the spectrum. And additionally, because of the little curl rhyme, I also was associating my hair, which is an external striking image of my ethnicity. I associated that with the horrid end of things. And so keeping that in check and keeping that hidden was part of the accommodating, particularly usually white supremacist society in which I was operating and working. So unlearning that process, unlearning that one or the other isn't the only way to live, but to live with the plurality that we all inhabit and to engage with both sides of that spectrum has been a big part of my journey. And that journey, as I'm talking about it in terms of the recovering from academia part today, has been an interesting one. I did play by the rules, and I grew up in a family that believed in respectability politics. And enforced that, and believed therefore that if we played by the rules, we would be treated like everybody else. We would never be treated like second-class citizens. So that meant gaining a lot of cultural capital growing up. I came from a family that didn't have a lot of money, but we also saved the money that we had for things like concert tickets to classical music events and music lessons, and paid a lot of attention to the importance of education. Both my parents are educators, and that was a way out. That was a way to advance up through the class system. I performed very well in school. I completed my master's and doctoral degrees in 5 years, and then came to Colgate in a dissertation fellowship, and then for the following year for a postdoc fellowship. And this was a great place. I had beautiful mentors who taught me a lot about how to be an academic. It also taught me a lot about how to operate in a predominantly white institution at that time. And I was grateful to have additional mentors who guided me in the process of working within an institution to identify issues of identity that affect students and affect faculty, in fact, affect all of us. But I wasn't really clear yet on how to do that and be myself, fully myself. So I taught classes that were meaningful to me, and I taught about maternity, even though I'm not a mother. I taught about African anti-colonial literature and South African literature during apartheid. And when I left Colgate, I was still doing everything right. I went to a Research One institution and taught there in a tenure track position. Was very well received and encouraged to keep doing all the good things that academics do. Publishing, presenting at conferences, teaching, advising, creating new courses. And I kept on that path for another couple of years. And I started to realize that I wasn't feeling fully fulfilled. I thought it was about the institution. It was too big. It wasn't personal in the way. I was a big research institution. Unlike Colgate, I didn't have as many opportunities to interact with students in a close and personal way. So I walked away from that job to take a one-year position at a private high school. And that's a pretty big deal. That's a deviation from the path. You know, if you're an academic, you're supposed to stay in the tenure track position and keep climbing that ladder. And I realized that that wasn't as important to me as the personal relationships that I developed with students working in a smaller institution. Well, lo and behold, this is like a story tale. Lo and behold, as I made that transition, I had also moved back to Portland, Oregon, where I had lived for a few years before grad school. And I moved with my partner, who didn't have a job at the time. And in that year, we realized that we wanted to stay in Portland. And a job opened up at a university, a small university, similar to Colgate in size. And I took that job and had another tenure track position. And so that's where I remained for the next 6 years. And as many of you probably know, academia is a very white place, and it's a white supremacist place. It's an institution that is not built to reflect the experiences or to value the experiences of those of us who are not white, male, heterosexual, this goes on and on and on. And while I was there, I started to speak out more and more publicly about what it meant to be in my particular positions, multiple positions, as an individual in this institution. And that included speaking publicly about the fact that when I was coming up for tenure, I would have been the institution's first Black woman ever to receive tenure. And this is at a university that is billed as the oldest university in the West. So it is 1859, I think, is when it was established. And I spoke out about that on a panel in the months right before the tenure decision for my cohort. And then I did not receive tenure. And that was a very surprising decision. But the good, or the happier part of the story is that it happened at a time that I was already questioning my role in academia and my dedication to it as a community that I wanted to continue giving my energy toward. And I was still kind of buying into that all or nothing dichotomy where I felt like I can't be my whole self and still do all the work that I'm doing to make this place, this institution, support me and to support people like me, including students, but also my colleagues of color who I was hiring and my queer colleagues who were floundering and all of us who were really struggling to feel like our work was reflecting our personal experiences. My health was also suffering, and I'm a pretty healthy person, but in my early 30s, I was diagnosed with dangerously high blood pressure, which is a strange thing to have. It doesn't run in my family. And it was because I was commuting an hour on good days back and forth to my campus. I was working all the time, no breaks, just it's an endless job. And I was also realizing more and more, living in Portland, Oregon, which is the whitest city in America, it's a claim to fame of late, that I lived and operated in predominantly white spaces, whether or not I was at work. That was kind of my experience because most of the people that I was spending time with were other academics or somehow connected to the academic experience. And I started to use this expression, I developed this sort of metaphor. If you think about a taxi cab being on duty, you see the sign that says it's on duty. When the light is off, it's not on duty. And I started to feel like I'm a cab and people are seeing me as on duty all the time. Whether or not I want to be, whether or not I really am prepared to be, they're going to get in my cab and they're going to want me to take them somewhere. And whether that took the form of people asking for my opinion about the latest police shooting, or whether it was about people wanting to talk to me about their struggles with racism as a white person, or their struggles with anything that they were feeling guilty about. People were getting into my cab. And in the most egregious of those cases, the metaphor continues. It's like someone gets in my cab and throws up, and I have to clean it up and drive them somewhere. And it doesn't matter if I'm off duty, I'm still working. So there's no time that I'm not at work. So this kind of is presaging my later workshop this afternoon, in that I started to think about my work differently. If I'm at work all the time, and I'm never not at work, and I'm working at an institution that I didn't hate. I mean, there were many things I loved about the work that I was doing. I had phenomenal classes and students of people that I really could see I was making a difference with, communicating well with. But if I'm never not working, how can I become more in control of the work that I do? And so I was starting to think about this as I was coming up for tenure, and I was really getting scared that I'm going to be locked into a system that doesn't reflect my personal experience in many ways, and it's very harmful and traumatic in lots of other ways. And I might get stuck. It's very tempting to stay once one is tenured, and it's good money and it's reliable. So it was ultimately a good thing to be able to walk away from it. And as I started to make the transition away from academia, I kind of operated the same way I always had. Like, okay, well, that's done. I'm going to move on to the next thing, and I'm ready. And I put together a business plan, and I wrote up all the details of what I was going to do as an independent contractor, consultant. I was going to be advising people on issues of identity and talking about how to be more culturally aware, similar conversations that I've been doing in the classroom. But I wanted to do it in a way that I'd have more autonomy. And I also started applying for fellowships, and I started looking at the Oregon Humanities Foundation, which allows independent educators to go around the state and to educate community groups. So I had already done this kind of work as an academic, and I thought, oh, I'll do this independently. And right about as I was getting geared up with all sorts of energy to do this work, it was about 9 months after I left academia, I got in a car accident. And this is interesting because I used to commute an hour each way, like 60 miles each way to my job. Never got in an accident. And now I'm not doing that commute. And I was in a parked car. My car wasn't even turned on, and I got rear-ended. I mean, I did nothing. I had nothing to do. I was just sitting there. And over the course of all of this transition, this professional transition, I was also going through some spiritual transitions. And I was starting to think that there might not be that many accidents after all, that this isn't an accident, that things happen for a reason. And in my case, in my life, this is repeatedly proven true. So sitting in my parked car, I get rear-ended, shouldn't have been much damage at all, but I wound up getting my 6th concussion. As a result, my head snaps back and forth, and who knows, because I maybe had a propensity for concussions. I wound up with some pretty serious trauma and brain stuff, and was knocked off my feet for another 6 months, right at the point where I figured I have to do the most amount of work to get my new business up and running. And I took it as a sign from the universe that I am meant to process the very serious transition from believing I was going to be in a career for the rest of my life. I did everything right. I went to the right schools, I trained, I got my degrees, I got these great fellowships, I went through the process just as an academic is supposed to. I had bought a house, I was stable, I had a stable income, and I wasn't able to do that. And in my entire life, I am very fortunate. I had not struggled with mental illness before, but this experience put me into depression. And it took another 6 months after I came out of it to even recognize it as depression. I didn't know what it was. I just knew that I couldn't do anything. I couldn't get off the couch, couldn't watch TV because my brain wasn't able to. I couldn't read, I couldn't focus. I just felt like crap for 6 months. There were good days, but mostly crap. And through it all, I very fortunately had an incredibly supportive partner who had been with me since graduate school. So through this whole trajectory. So I came to Colgate for a year when we were first together. And the second year, my partner was hired to come up and join me. And then we were able to kind of do this amazing thing in academia, which is find work in the same cities successfully. And so again, we were doing everything right. We were living the dream. And here I was leaving that profession and saying, I don't want to do this anymore. You're still doing it, but I think it's not, it's not a place for me. And I continue to have this unconditional love and support. And I mention this because I think it is integral to the way that my story has progressed. And it's not something that we talk about enough in academia. A lot of what I've been talking about so far is my personal story, but it's also a communal story in that I've been supported by communities. I've been supported by my friends. I've been supported by colleagues who cared and who were able to talk about the critiques I was making of our institutions in relationship to their own experiences and to see my experience as valid. I had a lot of colleagues who didn't see things that way. And part of what I was going through with the mental recovery process was really addressing the trauma that I had encountered in all of those years of work within academia, as a graduate student even, but then as a professional. I taught about trauma. So the courses that I taught from the anti-colonial work in African literature that I did here, I developed courses on African American literature, and I focused on contemporary representations of slavery. And so repeatedly, I was introducing students to the ideas of our ancestral, our American historical precedents for contemporary caste system, our American caste system. And I did that from kind of an academic distance. Mika and I have been talking a little bit about this, how there's that distance of here's a story of what's happened in our history, not here's how I personally live this experience every day, in a visibly raced and gendered body. This is what I experience as a result of this history. And you in my classroom might experience these things as well. It was sort of the unspoken secondary story to what we were all studying. And I wanted to bridge that. I wanted to eliminate that gap between the academic and the personal, and the academic and the lived experience. I think it's an arbitrary, artificial distance. I know that some of your professors actually are good at making that connection better than others. Some courses, some disciplines are better at making that connection than others. And certainly institutions struggle with that distinction. The heart and the head, wherever they are located in the body. I'd like to think I have that figured out. The distance has collapsed for me in many profound and positive ways. Yeah, and it feels really, really good. And in fact, I'm so much happier and healthier in every possible way as a result of owning my own process, my own way of operating in the world. And just to be a little bit more specific about that, after I came out of this period of depression and started to get back on my feet, I was really bad habit of, I used to do this with my writing projects where I'd think, oh, this is a really great idea, and I'd sit down to write an article. And I'd forget that I'd already written pretty much the foundation of that article 6 times before. I go, no, I have to start from scratch. I'm going to start over. And if you write papers, keep this in mind. You may have written something, there may be a nugget of a good idea already written that you've written. So go back and look at that. Don't start reinventing the wheel every time. So what I realized after a little bit of time was, oh yeah, I already wrote a business plan, and it's still really good. And I already, conceived of this kind of work that I wanted to do. And in fact, now I'm doing it. I mean, I was describing precisely this, going to campuses and being able to speak about my story and being able to talk about this connection between the heart and the head, and the realization that the work is more meaningful when it is embodied and when it's coming from a place of self-reflection that allows me to bring my whole self into the work. I do a lot of storytelling now and storytelling circuits around Portland. This is not paid work, so it's why I still need to have a job. But it's still, I'm sharing stories in predominantly white spaces. Again, whitest city in America. And it's, I think, really valuable in every one of those cases that my story, whatever it's about, because there are lots of different topics, brings into the narrative the way that I live in my body and how my body is read and how it is received. And violence that is done to it as a result of those visible identities. And it's challenging material. It can be uncomfortable for audiences to hear. But it's also informed by the work that I did professionally as an academic. And in closing, I want to say that another part of that work that I'm very passionate about, I've always written and I've always journaled. And so that's a great way for me to, again, bridge that gap, to write from the heart. But the writing that I did, I thought it had to be academic in order for it to have value. And Mika mentioned Peculiar Intimacies, which is the name of a course that I taught repeatedly. It's the name of a conceit that I came up with while I was here at Colgate. And I talked about it in terms of the peculiar institution, which is one of the euphemisms for slavery, or a way of talking about it. And the way I conceived of it, it was really to talk about the close relationships between Black and white Americans under, well, really in the antebellum period, where it sort of reached a height of daily contact with cross-racial contact that was happening in the midst of an arbitrary separation of people. So there's this peculiar intimacy. These, the enslaved people are our family, but we have enslaved them, and we're going to treat them this way. Or, these people are owning me, and they're family members. Lots of complications around that. But this concept of peculiar intimacy, I taught about. I titled talks with it, and I was working on that as my book project. And I thought that was the only way to do it, that's the valuable way to get this idea out in the world. And over time, I've realized my life has kind of included a lot of these peculiar intimacies. My mother is white, my partner is white, and a lot of my friends are white. And I have taught a lot of white students, and I've taught a lot of my white colleagues and peers. And that's a beautiful thing, that I have relationships where people are, it's both a beautiful thing and it's also a source of violence and trauma. So, I'm not going to do the dichotomy thing. It really is a complex relationship. But it means that I know how to have these conversations. I know how to have cross-cultural communication. And I'm able to capitalize on that as an independent educator and as a consultant. I'm able to talk about what it means to live in in dialogue with people who may not share your cultural background and about whom you may have a whole host of stereotypes based on all sorts of myths that you've been taught, that we've all been taught, and how to unthink those, how to unlearn those. And the final thing I'll say about that is, in addition to writing Peculiar Intimacies, the non-strictly academic book, I'm also working on a number of things. So I am a consultant, I am obviously a public speaker, and I am now developing a podcast with my partner that is called Unlearning. And Unlearning really takes to task the idea that we have been given a whole host of lies, that we base our day-to-day interactions on a bunch of mythology that we need to identify the source of first. We need to recognize what the source of those myths might be, where they occur in history, what institutions have reproduced them for us. And then only then, once we've identified them, we can start to dismantle them. We can start to unlearn them. It's not an easy process. It's not point A, point B, we're done. It's first, let's look at them, find the source, examine the source, and then start to kind of slowly pull them apart. And once the unlearning process has fully gone into, is underway, then we can start rebuilding with new information. So listen for my voice, and I would say about 6 months. I think this is going to happen. And it's a beautiful thing to be working with my partner and to be able to share that with the world and not think that because it's not strictly academic, it's not something that is supported within the institution, that it isn't of value. Institutions reproduce what they're already doing. They're not usually places of radical invention. They can be. They have the potential, but a lot of them, by their structure, are not meant to do that. And I'm really eager to take a lot of questions, so I'm going to stop talking so that we can move on to what you want to say. Thank you so much for listening. Oh, great. Yeah. Yes, thank you. At 4:30, I'm going to be kind of demonstrating a little bit of the work that I've been doing of late with a workshop that combines the performative aspect of what I do with some interactive exercising of the ideas that I'm demonstrating. So I know that's a little cryptic, but it will be both performative and interactive. Nothing, you don't have to perform if you're there, but I'm going to ask you to think and maybe take some of the ideas and put them into practice for yourselves. And yeah, 4:30 here. I'll be here. You should be here too.
Can you please hold the mic so everyone can hear? Thank you.
Can you please talk a little more about institutional change and like what do you do when other people in the institution believe that change is happening, but in reality it's not? And like how does one deal with that?
Great question. Thank you. One of the challenges around recognizing what change has happened and what change does not, for me, comes from different ideas. We all have different ideas of what change looks like and how much actually has to have taken place for us to recognize it as change. I worked usually in interdisciplinary programs, and they were underfunded by institutions and sometimes excised altogether, no longer considered valuable. And yet we did the hardest work, it felt like, in those areas to try to address institutional change. What to do when it's not happening fast enough?
Or like when people use the language of change, but they're like manipulating it to veil the fact that there's no change really happening, and a majority of like people believe in that. You know, like students at Colgate, a lot of them believe that change is happening now, but like what does that mean when in reality it may not be happening? So confusing.
It is, yeah, no, it's very confusing, and you're right. I think I hear some suspicion in this, you know, like this, we're being told change is happening, but it's not really happening. I actually will say I believe in radical revolution, and if change isn't happening, and you've done everything, and if you've done everything you can to make it happen within that structure, then the structure is at fault, and it might be necessary to leave it. In my case, I mean, that's my experience is walking away, and that's not going to be enough if everyone were to just, well, if everyone were to leave. We might have a very different country right now. There's not an easy answer to this question because if it's a situation where change just has not happened fast enough or it hasn't happened yet, but you see that there is the potential and you have enough people invested in the change you have in mind. I think collectively there's a lot of power. And I also believe very strongly that it takes all different types of fighting. And that fighting can be done with love, and that fighting can be done with votes, and fighting can be done with rewriting constitutions. And there's lots of different ways so that the change itself may not have a specific endpoint, and it may not have a specific constitution. It may be made up of these different pieces or these different ways. I really don't feel like I have a good answer to this. It's a challenge. Thank you for asking the question. We'll think about it.
Thank you.
I have something that's just kind of reflective because we go a ways back, and I'm still in academia, as you all know, and not yet recovering, shall we say. But I'm thinking about what you were saying about unlearning, which I just love. And I also think about the incentives, especially for faculty, certainly for administrators, that there are not incentives for unlearning. That what I guess I have seen is that as we go through a system which credentials us, there's more and more pressure to just stay with what we have learned, especially pedagogically, I think. Sometimes it is with maybe the content of what we're teaching. It's a lot of the content of what we're teaching too. And so I guess I don't really have a question here, but I think just reflecting on my frustration that for many faculty, it would seem that the unlearning is not something that people are taking seriously. And I just wish that as faculty, we could do much more unlearning.
Thank you. I agree, and I also think I have something to say about that. I am deeply invested in the affective part of the process of unlearning and of teaching. So it's a pedagogical methodology, I guess, is to focus on the way we feel about how we sit in discomfort is kind of a catchphrase these days, but I think there's a lot of fear associated with change and with unlearning. It's taking down a system that has rewarded us in some strange ways as academics. We're meant to believe that it's a normal practice to only be promoted twice in your entire 30-year plus career. That is not, I don't think that's an especially helpful incentive. I also think that for a lot of people who are in not just the system of academia, I use the example of the nursery rhyme that kind of formed my identity for a long time, because it is just one of so many examples of you're either in or you're out. You're either good or you're bad, or you're good or you're horrible. Unthinking a binary structure is at the root of what I'm talking about, and there is almost nothing more fundamental. I mean, that's a really distinct way of it's a heuristic that a lot of us buy into because we haven't ever experienced anything else. We don't know of another model. And the heart-centered model that I'm kind of moving toward doesn't work like that. And it's not about the individual self and everyone else. It's not self and other, it's collective. We rise together, we make change together. We all have our ways of contributing to that. And I think within academia, we belittle that because it is scary. It is such a fundamental challenge. It can take down the systems if we buy into it and we figure out how to make that work together. So one of the things that I do, I think, most effectively, both in the classroom and now that I'm doing it independently, is letting people sit with the trauma and recognize that it is traumatic to start to challenge everything, because it goes back to everything. So it's going to be less easy to just change or reward because the system does what the system was designed to do, which is to not reward that kind of love-based work or a restructuring. It's much less likely that that would happen than the structure itself would be just really altered dramatically, which is a good thing. Yeah.
Hey, thanks. So I've been thinking a lot about, and as we were talking, it's even in how I think about it, it's a binary kind of thing of like intellectually understanding and then like emotionally understanding and feeling your way through scenarios. And then I guess in intellect, like in your writing, in your like creative process for your papers and things like that, and I say creative very intentionally there because like I don't like create art, but I create papers and I write and I think in ways like that, and I think it is creative. But how do you have maybe any, I guess, examples of action steps or ways that as either a professor or a student that you can like incorporate that in your intellectual work? Because like clearly, like if I'm writing a paper for my biology thing, like there are certain like codified structures and ways that they require you to speak and they require you to use language. But I don't know, like are there maybe in other avenues or in other ways, like how can I incorporate like feeling or like hearing my voice when I'm writing, even if it is for a disciplinary type of scenario?
I love being here. Great questions. Yeah, well, first of all, you're in the right space. I think women's studies is an excellent resource for looking at models of ways to bring the personal voice into various disciplines. I still remember one of the first articles that I read that shocked me in that it did it was a single author, but it was demonstrating these two ways of approaching a problem with a personal narrative alongside the kind of much more staid academic description, and it worked beautifully. And I thought this is a very brave choice that this author has made. It was an essay on maternity, and it was interspersing the author's experience of being a mother with the argument that she was making. Within a discipline like biology or any other discipline that has a very specific language to it and expectations of how to do that work, again, I think you have to start by acknowledging that this is going to not necessarily be well received if you do include that personal voice. But if you choose topics that you are engaged by, if you have that freedom to really push to find ways that you can bring yourself into the subject, even if the language with which you express that subject isn't as conducive to the personal way that you want to, or the creative way that you have of bringing your voice into it. It's very difficult with disciplines that are not, most disciplines I think are very expansive in that way. Coming from a humanities background, I had a little bit more leeway, a little bit. But even then, there's so much pushback against doing that. Your work will be belittled. It's considered not well supported by evidence. And I feel a little bit hypocritical saying this, but use the master's tools to dismantle the house to some extent, because you want people to listen to you. And I think from a student perspective, you're going to have more challenges just trying to get acknowledged for the work that you're doing. You can't deviate so far from the assignment that the work that you're submitting is no longer recognizable as meeting the criteria. But I also, again, believe in pushing back and saying, okay, I'll give you a concrete example. When I was at Michigan State University, I advised a senior honors thesis of an English major, and the student wanted to do a critical analysis of creative work, but she was also an exceptional creative writer. She wound up doing basically a double thesis that married both her critical perspective and her own writing, and she wound up writing critiques that were very incisive of her own writing. And it had never been done before, and nobody in the department wanted to take it on, and nobody felt like it could be a successful project because that's just too weird. It doesn't fit with our disciplinary expectations. And I took it on probably because I was a first year professor there, and I really liked the student, and I knew that she would do something extraordinary, and she did. And we just expanded the evaluative criteria. It wasn't like she got a break. She basically had to do twice the work. But she was more fulfilled by it, and she walked away with a thesis that she felt extremely confident about, and she was able to shop it around, and has gone on to do extraordinary things. So that's an example of it's maybe it's not going to be easy, but it taught. She was able to feel invested, and she taught the department something really important in the process. And subsequently, there have been other theses that combined those kinds of disciplinary subjects. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, I might try and inform it. So I am a geology student, and my plan is to go into academia. And having done research on basically, specifically the role of women in science, but also I would like to go more into like studying kind of the impression of women and the impression of people of color in academia and in science. And so, and one thing that I found is the whole idea of like the leaky pipeline, which is basically as you move up into academia, you begin to lose support. And you also are expected to be representative of like your entire like cultural group or your entire like gender. And so, for example, like committees want to be diverse, so they start like bringing in women, bringing in people of color, and then that takes away from their ability to write papers and like do their research, which ends up not allowing them to make tenure and type of stuff like that. But so as like a woman going into science, like that's a very like huge thing that is kind of hanging over my head, where it just, I guess it becomes like, how do you succeed in academia when there is a huge part of academia needs to be changed? And so like how, I guess it's like a two question like thing where it's like, how do you think, like if you had made tenure, do you think you would have stayed in academia? And so how do you think academia needs to change so that you would have stayed in? Or how do you think that we can change academia? Because it needs to be changed so people are learning the correct things. So how do we do this? Not correct things, but like are learning more like inclusive and good things. And even like in science, you need to like be able to be teaching people, and you need to be representing people. But so how do you keep people in academia then? So that they can.
What kind of things?
Yeah. What would make you stay?
My personal story is that I didn't want to stay. I mean, ultimately, I am very glad not to have stayed. And I might have, with tenure, I might have stayed for another year, and my health would have been shot. And I just don't think it was the right fit for me. And I don't think it's right for everyone. And I also think that if you are invested in it and you want to succeed in it, and you want people who aren't like you to succeed in it, you work with the privilege that you have to speak up and to be on those committees, and don't just require that other people learn how to say no to all the demands that are placed inordinately on women of color and women and people of color, to be on every committee, to do all the work that you're talking about, all this extra work. It's not just on us to say no, it's on you not to ask. So that's a big part of it, is shifting the dynamic so that it isn't solely the responsibility of the exploited people to, who are often in vulnerable positions, so pre-tenure, to speak up and to be changing the course of an institution that already wasn't designed for us, it doesn't maintain our health, it doesn't do many things to support us. So it is the job of people who are committed, and I think a lot of you are probably considering, some academic future, that at least in grad school, you're going to have opportunities to have real discussions about institutional growth and expansion and redesign. And you will make those opportunities if you are thinking about those things. I don't think it's not an individual task, so you could personally do work on that. You could definitely make a research agenda that includes that, which would be one powerful way to do it, and it could help you to feel more invested. But I think coalition building is incredibly important. It's very valuable to have a sense of community wherever you are. And I will say this, what would have made me stay in academia? One big thing would have been having a community that had, that better reflected my own experience. So again, I would have been the first Black woman to receive tenure there. I was also the only Black woman on the entire faculty. And it was a university. So there was one other woman in the law school who I never crossed paths with. It's about hiring and personnel decisions. It's about programmatic decisions that help people who are teaching topics that are going to be inundated with students who are interested have more time to do our research, or who are in every committee and every advising opportunity and being asked all the time to do all this work. It's about making space for those colleagues and peers, classmates, to get a break, to distribute the labor more equitably. And I think that's true outside of academia. I mean, this is true in all sorts of, what I do now is I'm advising sometimes corporations, small businesses, everything in between, institutions of higher learning. And the conversation is so often the same. We all have a role, but those of us with greater privilege need to be stepping up to take on those opportunities to cause the changes to occur. And to do so, especially with the protection of tenure, in the case of academia, or in the hierarchical structures that so many of us operate in, to use that privilege to speak and just to say this isn't healthy. To pay attention, when people are floundering and when people are struggling.
Thank you.
Thank you for everything you've shared with us. Hearing your narrative, and I think you're in a space where hindsight can be a little bit 20/20, and you are in a healthier, happier space, which is so wonderful. But thinking about healing or recovery as sort of a lifelong undertaking, and that it's not always linear, and that there are ups and downs. How do you find yourself now? Do you find yourself in a better space to cope with healing? How do you find yourself still having to do healing work, or is that happening for you? And what does that look like when doubts or questions or past fears or past traumas come up into your life now?
I think that I have had a dramatic change in heart and mind and behavior around healing, so that I'm able to incorporate it into my daily life. It's not I no longer wait for the crisis to instigate the healing process. There's no, I have to, in addition to the car accident, I fell down my stairs, 2 different sets of stairs back to back within a month period. Right when I started thinking, I'm back on my feet, everything's great, boom, I fell down the stairs. And it became laughable. I got hurt, and it also made me laugh. And that's kind of a different response. It wasn't a, woe is me, why is this happening? It was a wake-up call that, oh, I'm still trying to ignore what my body is telling me, which is I was pushing myself. And what I've started to recognize is that I am in control of my mind. I am in control of my decisions. No one is making me do anything. I don't have to work in an institution, and this is answering your question, but in a roundabout way. This is a really important point that I'm glad your question generated. I have a very different concept of what I need. So the material relationship that I have with stuff has changed dramatically. And I'm saying this from the position, a very privileged position of having been a professor and making that salary for years. So I own that house. So I have that huge, that's a very big property issue to have that, but safety issue. But I also require so much less. I don't need things. And very few of us need as much as we think we need. And unlearning that is a constant reminder. It really has been dramatic to watch how I make spending decisions when I no longer have a steady income. I didn't have a reliable income. I'm an independent contractor, so I don't have a salary. And it's liberating. It's not terrifying. It's been a little scary at some points, but it's also allowed me to rethink my relationships to accumulation. I'm living differently. I'm moving out of my house and renting it out, so I have that source of income, and moving into my basement. That's fine. That's good. I'm excited about it. So healing, I'm allowing myself to prioritize healing. So it's not secondary to work. It's not like I work so that I can eventually have some time to, or I'm not, yeah, so I can eventually have some time to take care of myself. Like, oh, it's the weekend, I can get sick. Or, for academics, it's so often, oh, it's the summer, now it's spring break, I can get sick, I can ruin my vacation. And I don't do that. I meditate every day, not so much when I'm traveling. I'm still working on that, but I stretch every day, twice, and for an hour the second time, and that's a meditative practice. And it really is a practice. It seems like, how am I ever going to find the time to do that? There's no way. There's not enough time. Of course there is. Of course there is. It's just taken me time to recognize that my priorities have to shift and have to allow for that. And I have benefited again and again and again and again. It becomes a practice as I begin to see the value in it in my daily life. So yeah, I don't think of healing as you do it once, you move on. And I also don't think I would work in any sort of an industry that did not allow me space to do those important self-care practices. And it also is communal. And I want to mention that because we were talking about self versus community care and the experience of that being one that I think we need to rely and to talk about this. Academia does not make space for that conversation. That we're pressured in academia to be self-promoting and to kind of move our way up independently through this process. And we forget, because we're discouraged from thinking that we actually benefit when we benefit, right? It's not just the one of us doing better. There is room for everyone to do better. And that certainly extends outside of academia. But I think that's helpful that when I learn something that seems to be working for me, I want to share that. I want people to know this is working for me. I don't know if it'll work for you, but we can try. And I have been hearing again and again and again from people that just this process, my own process of unlearning, is a model for their own beginning process of doing the same, whether it's through a similar path or not. Questions? I will say, just as a heads up, that the 4:30 performance workshop will include a little bit more examples of the trauma of this process. So if I sound pretty, I'm still very optimistic and happy. Not optimistic. I'm very positive. It hasn't always been super easy. So it's not exactly a trigger warning, but you might take it as such. So just to be aware.
So in my experience, thank you. So in my experience at a place like Colgate, where the top 1% in the United States, 22% at Colgate. I didn't say that correctly. So in the United States, 22% of the population that's in the top 1% financially goes to Colgate. 22% of the people goes to Colgate. Okay, so thank you. Sorry, not in the United States, at Colgate. I feel like as a white appearing upper middle class, woman who I resonate a lot with your stuff, with what you're saying. I don't want to say I understand it, but I want to get past, I feel like a lot of white people sit in sadness, and then that's really satisfying, and then you talk about it at a place like Colgate. I'm finding that we just are in our own spaces, and I think that's a United States thing, an institutional thing. And I wanted to ask you if you think the emotional labor, I don't know, talking about these things in these spaces is worth it for anyone, or should it be done outside of the institutions? And then I guess you said that it should be done within by the people who can do it, right? Sorry.
No,
That's not a question. I don't like. Yeah. I apologize.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what I might add to that. I do think emotional labor looks different for different people. And just to maybe I wasn't as clear as I could have been about what I was saying too about what keeps us from action. And I talk about this when I teach the difference between empathy and sympathy, and feeling bad and feeling with. So if there's this sort of I use the phrase the stultifying effects of guilt and shame. Like, I'm a white person, I'm a wealthy person, I have all this privilege. I just feel bad, and I'm just going to sit and maybe I'll talk about it with some people, but I'm not going to do anything different because I'm frozen by the feelings of shame. And because I taught history and I would talk a lot about the 19th century, one of the things I really want to recognize is that nobody alive today is responsible for our ancestors in the 19th century. We're not responsible for what they did. We benefit, and some of us benefit more from that than many others, and a lot of us are suffering as a result of that. But we didn't do those things. And just sitting in the shame and discomfort and the sadness about that isn't productive. It isn't productive at all, and in fact, it puts a lot more effort in the laps of those of us who don't benefit from that history to try to make things different. So it's kind of going back to your question too, like what's the role? And especially if you want to study inequity and you want to make things different, you got to recognize that just feeling bad is not, it's not, there's no movement coming out of that. There's no action coming out of that. So again, it's not you stop feeling bad and start moving. It's you have to take the time to really work through why you're feeling guilt, why you're feeling shame, and recognize that those, again, are not productive. You can feel bad, but then you can, like, first of all, be clear about what you're feeling bad about. Are you feeling bad about something that happened 150 years ago? You can feel, again, and I want to be clear about this. I'm talking about white privilege. I'm talking about it as a white privilege to feel bad and not moved. Toni Morrison talks about her first novel, WMST, as a failure, which she's wrong. But she's wrong in that she felt it was a failure because it touched readers but did not move them. It made readers think this is a really sad story, but it didn't move them to action. And this is where she's wrong. I know that now people, I can definitely attest to the fact that people are moved and acting in response to having read it. But maybe not outside of a classroom where there's a discussion about it, or maybe not outside of a book group discussion of it. If you're just reading it by yourself, you might just feel really bad and not know what to do with that information. And that's true of the news. It's true of a lot of what we're inundated with. We can feel bad, but that's not enough to be moved. So, long answer to your question. We keep anybody, but I'll be around here if you want to chat.
Thank you so much.